The best computer for video editing. Is there really such thing? Some of the most frequent questions I get are, what computer am I using? Am I using a desktop or a laptop? What video card would I recommend? Did I build my own computer? What are the specs of my computer? I've been wanting to do a video on this subject, but I've been collecting some information so I can provide you guys with some useful tips that I wish I would have known when I built my first computer. So, well, this is not my computer. This is my computer. Okay, so before we open this bad boy, I want to point out a few different things. One, this computer was built about 3 years ago. At the time, I didn't know much about computer and hardware, or at least how they were built inside, and what the parts were for. So I had to ask a friend of mine who was a little bit more knowledgeable in this area to help me out. If I would build another computer today, I would probably go a little different, but just for experience, just to know how other CPUs or other hardware components would work on this. Not necessarily because this is not good enough, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Nowadays, video editing is a very, very vague term. It's being used from 3D animations to simple timeline cuttings. So I'm going to try to cover as much ground in this particular video and how my computer helps me work on those areas. From simple timeline editing to color correction all the way to animating 3D. So let's get started.
Quieren por ser chilango. Nunca me quiso.
Okay, so here are all the parts outside of the computer. I'm gonna have to go buy one of those dust removers and clean it up because it's a lot dirtier than I was expecting. Okay, so here I have my motherboard and my CPU. I won't take the CPU out as I did it once and I was just feeling very skeptical. I felt like something broke. Thankfully not. The CPU I went for is the AMD FX 8350 Black Edition. So far, I can't really complain. Based on the price, running on 8 cores, I think it's one of the best out there on the market for the price given. So far has done really, really good work. I don't game on my computer, not a gamer on the computer, so can't really give you an experience on that. But as far as I know, the little research I've done on it, people say that for gaming wise, works pretty good. For me, visual wise, video wise, works pretty good. We'll get into the details a little bit later. Once you have selected the CPU that you're going to be using, you move on to your motherboard. Once you have your CPU, you go to your motherboard, make sure your motherboard fits that CPU, and then say, okay, I need this amount of USBs. I need USB 3.0. I need to have video integrated because I'm not going to buy a video card, and then you move on. In my case, I ended up with the Biostar T8970. The bad side of this motherboard is that it doesn't have video hardware integrated. I would recommend getting a motherboard with video hardware integrated in case your video card gets messed up, you have some backup in there. My video card got messed up. I once took a flight, and I believe probably the static of the flight, I don't know. My video card got messed up, and I didn't have any other backup. When my video card got messed up, I ended up buying an NVIDIA GeForce GT 610, which I don't like at all. Once you select your motherboard, you should know what type of RAM you're going to be using. In my case, I ended up with 32 gigs. I added 8 gigabytes of the ADATA XDG DDR3, giving it a total of 32 gigabytes of RAM. At first I started with 16 and then I actually upgraded another 16 at a later date. My hard drive, I decided to go for a Samsung solid state drive. It's a 500 gigabyte, and this is where I have all my big softwares. Well, actually this is where I have all my softwares. After Effects, Maya, Premiere, all my editing softwares are in there. If you're looking to be an editor, you definitely want to have a solid state drive. It gives you really fast reading speeds between your softwares in your data. Your software needs to read all that information and needs to read it as fast as possible so you can work faster. Definitely would recommend getting a solid state drive. I do have a few extra hard drives, but these are just backup. I don't have any softwares in there. Every time I'm working on a project, I have to add all the information to my solid state drive. That way I can work as fast as I can. For my video card, I ended up going with the AMD Sapphire Tri-X 290X 4GB DDR5. I have to point out that based on my experience and giving the price of this card, it's definitely really good, especially if you're editing within After Effects. A lot of the third-party plugins, they use a video card. They work with your video card or your GPU, like Element 3D, Twixtor Pro. They all utilize the power of your video card. So my experience, definitely, this is one of the best video cards out there for the price. I also added an LG Blu-ray DVD drive, as when I just started, I was burning a lot of media content for my customers. On top of that, I added a multiple media card reader. When I started this, I was filming a lot of weddings, parties, and whatnot. So even some other third-party works, they would provide me with SD cards, and that way, whatever card they would provide, I would always be prepared for it, and I would just have to plug it in and start working. To keep my CPU cool, I recently upgraded to a Corsair Hydro H100i series. The reason why I upgraded mainly was the noise. Here is my stock fan for my CPU. I personally don't like the noise. It was driving me nuts, especially in the summer when everything gets hot. This thing is really silent. However, the stock fans that come with this, they're not so silent. They're not as noisy as a stock fan, but they are noisy. So if I was gonna go for something silent, I wanted it to be completely silent. So I removed those fans and I added the fans that came with my tower. So those fans are very silent. Now when I turn on my computer, I barely even. To power up my rig, I ended up getting a Shark 1000 watts power supply. The reason why I went with this particular brand, or this particular, well, the model, I wanted to be prepared because I was going to be upgrading for, at the time I thought I might ended up getting 2 video cards, or adding, I don't know, more fans. You never know. So I always try to be prepared, having a little bit more, just in case. So I ended up with 1000 watts. Mainly the reason why I like this power supply is because it has these connections you can simply plug in or remove if you're not using them. So if you're not using a bunch of these, you just remove them, and that way you don't have that many cables hanging around compared to other ones. I also have a second power supply. This is a Corsair CX750 power supply. This power supply has a lot of cables and they're not detachable. They're always there. I don't even like to look at it. It's just driving me nuts. The reason why I bought it, I thought this got messed up. Long story short, I thought this got messed up, so I bought another power supply. They were both good, but I had no need for this power supply after, so I ended up going back to my old one, which again, I just love the convenience of putting whatever I need or removing cables that I don't need. It just makes it a lot easier to manage. As for the case, I went for the Phantom NZXT full tower case in black. Not only it looks super sexy, but I like the fact that it has external levers to control multiple fan speeds, which is really cool. Okay, you could probably build this entire rig, except for the hard drives. You could probably build this same rig for about $1,300 today. I think that I paid around $2,000 around 3 years ago, especially the video card. If I recall right, the video card itself was about $600 or $700. Compared to the price today, I think you can get one for like $300 or $350. It's almost half of the price off. The rest of them, I don't remember. Just remember that the video card was the most expensive item. But again, you could probably build this computer, which is really good for editing, for about $1,300 compared with the MacBook Pro or some other third-party brands out there that they just sell you overpriced hardware for nothing. Okay, so like I said, I built this rig about 3 years ago, and since I have expanded my knowledge, my skills, and my need for more juice. If I could upgrade a few items on this computer, not for experience but just to test it out, I would definitely change my motherboard, my CPU, and my video card. Again, not because I personally need it at this point, but I would like to try out some bigger items out there. I would probably upgrade my CPU to an Intel i7-6950X, which runs about $1,500. But based on the reviews, it seems to be a very good CPU for video editing. Well, some people say different, but again, you have to test it out to see how it works for you. With that CPU, I would have to change my motherboard. This motherboard doesn't have the socket for that CPU, so I would have to change my motherboard, and I would probably go for an Asus X99E. Now that motherboard uses DDR4 memory RAM, so at that point, these memory RAMs are useless. So I would have to upgrade my RAM as well. Since I have 32 gigs of RAM right now, I believe that motherboard fits, I think it's about 64 gigabytes, and I will probably dump it all in there just to, sometimes I have reached the point where I fill up the 32 gigs of RAM using small scenes. I think they're still small scenes compared to some ideas that I have in my head sometimes, so bigger scenes. So I think I probably need about 128 gigs of RAM sometimes. And I would probably upgrade my video card to an NVIDIA K5200 as it has more memory. But just to upgrade those few items, it would be a total of $3,350. Wow, that's double the price of building an entire 2 more computers of these. Which at that point, I think I would just build another computer, put the rest of the parts, build another computer, that way I have 2 computers and render multiple scenes simultaneously. But to build an entire new computer, I would be looking at around $4,000, which again, I don't need at this point. But definitely if money wasn't an issue, I would probably be working on a workstation with maybe 44 cores, 2 Intel Xeons E5 2696, 44 cores. That way when I render 3D scenes, ray trace rendering, for those who don't know, ray trace rendering is done with your CPU, not with your video card. There is one render engine out there which is called Octane, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. That render engine does use your CPU, but it only uses NVIDIA video cards. So for me it's useless. I don't have an NVIDIA video card, and that small one is not going to work. So I'm rendering the 3D scenes that I use. Sometimes I render it with my CPU, so I would definitely love to have 44 cores. But that's probably like around $22,000, maybe one day. So if you're looking to build your own first rig and a mid-size level, I would definitely recommend these items that you see here. These are the items that I'm using. I'm not getting paid to tell you buy this or buy that. No, these are the items that I started with, and these are the items that I use. Especially if you're in the learning process, you don't want to go and buy a $2,000 video card. There's no need for it if you don't have the skills yet to use it. Or a $1,500 CPU. Or there's this one I think is around $150 right now, brand new. So definitely 8 cores. I think you can probably go good with that. But if you have the funds for a higher end rig, by all means, go for it. Here's a very useful tip. I've encountered people spending all their money on a very expensive video card, and they're still using a low-end CPU with like 4 cores or so. Or I've even seen people buying a very, very expensive CPU, but they're running on 4 gigs of RAM. I guess my point is, you don't need the best processor out there or the most expensive video card. Every component matters on your computer, from your hard drive to your video card to your RAM to your motherboard, which is going to connect everything together. So try to keep a balance between your hardware. If you have a certain amount of money, try to keep a balance where you spend that amount of money getting the best you can out of everything. Don't spend all your money on the most expensive video card if you don't have a really good CPU, or don't get a very big CPU if you don't have a lot of RAM. You want to keep a balance among all your hardware components. This way, when you combine all those items, you have one very powerful machine. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about how these things work for video editing and 3D and whatnot. It's not about what item you're using that you're gonna, the biggest video card is not gonna make you the best animator in the world or the best visual effects artist in the world. It's only a tool. You use the tool based on your knowledge. My recommendation, learn the software. See what the requirements are for the software. If you have all the requirements on your computer, then don't go for a bigger computer if you are running on some. Until your skills require more power from your computer, then you upgrade. Not because the plugin requires more power, you need it. It's when you require it. The plugin can need 32 gigs of RAM. You could throw in 32 gigs of RAM in Element 3D, but if you don't know how to use it, or if you're still lacking of more experience using the plugin, then there's not really any need for it. I had this big ass computer since day one, and at the time I didn't even know how to use Element 3D. Now I barely even touch that plugin. I'm using 3D softwares, and I'm starting to get the need for more juice. But I'm still within that learning process, so I'm still there. I guess it would be a little bit of a waste of money if I go ahead and throw in another $4,000 on a rig. So how does all that work? Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about After Effects. You could put After Effects in a very simple laptop and it will run it. And you could probably do very simple animations. But if you start running third-party plugins like Element, Particular, then it will slow down. A lot of those plugins need a good video card. Check if those plugins run on a GPU. If those plugins that are using the most run on a GPU, then you would definitely be off putting a little bit more money on your video card. But make sure you have a good processor. That's where you want to start. If your processor is processing all the information, basically that's what it's called, a processor. Try to get an okay processor. Again, I would recommend this processor. It's not that expensive and it's worth okay for me. If I remove this video card and I put this one in, I would probably still be able to pull off some good stuff. But my workflow is gonna slow down. Why? Because a lot of plugins, third-party plugins like Element 3D, they utilize the power of your GPU to work faster. So they render faster. Sometimes they even render in real time if you're not throwing the settings all the way high. So if I was using this one with Element 3D, then it might not render in real time because this GPU is very low. So with that GPU, it has a little bit more of capabilities. So it can render in real time, a little bit more complex scenes. If I remove that GPU and I'm stuck with this, I can still pull it off. But it might be slower. My workflow is going to be slower. Not that I can't do it, but just simply my workflow is going to be slower because in the end, the rendering time, it's still going to take a little bit longer, but I'm still going to get the same results at the end of the day. Okay, so to close this down, I want to say this. I don't think it's about what's the best video card or what's the best CPU or what's the best RAM or what's the best of anything. I think it's what's good for the job you're doing. Okay, so that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it and I was able to provide you with some useful information in case you're looking to build your own rig. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like button as it shows me that you guys like my content and I guess it inspires me to create some more. If you didn't like the video or if you feel like I missed something, make sure you post it in the comments below. Let me know how can I improve so I can provide you with a better learning experience. Also, I'm always open for new suggestions and to learn from others. As always, I want to thank you guys for stopping by in this, your house, dark house. I'm Sean Garris and today I would leave you guys with this quote. If you're waiting for that perfect moment, you're not going to be very productive. I'll see you guys next time. Dark house.